Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murdered three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. With us today is Daniel Allen Jones. Daniel loves to explore the dimensions of science, mystery, and spiritual philosophy. He is the creator and conscious media network called VORTEXAS, which focuses on alternative science, metaphysics, the paranormal, and beyond. Having helped organize and host events like the Texas Paranormal Unity Fest, the Aurora Alien Encounter, and others, Daniel has connected with several people that have very interesting stories to tell and feels they are worth sharing as they may offer much insight into some of our biggest questions in life. He is the producer for a metaphysical group called Satori and the program director for DFW MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. His multimedia work includes hundreds of video productions from these events and a wide variety of others, such as the Holistic Fair, the Texas Bigfoot Conference, the Edinburgh UFO Conference, the Roswell Festival, as well as independent investigations, interviews, performances, and more. Additionally, Daniel is a drum and music teacher, and he plays in a band around the DFW area. He can also be found hanging out with a bunch of aliens while working at the Star Wars shop and making his fan film. Most importantly, Daniel is the caretaker of his special needs brother, Matthew, who joins him on his adventures and who he dedicates his work to. Welcome to Strange Things.
Hey, Chris, glad to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Did you grow up in the Fort Worth area, or did you move there?
Actually, I grew up a little south of Fort Worth and went to school there. Moved around the Fort Worth area over the years, but that's where I'm originally from and still here.
At what stage in your life did you become interested in other things?
Well, I'd say growing up, I was fascinated by the idea of different creatures, whether it was, as you had mentioned earlier, different aliens from Star Wars that caught my attention and my curiosity, or just the idea that things like Bigfoot is roaming around out there and other mysterious phenomena had always been interesting to me. But I'd say that around the time I was 19 or 20, I really was going through some challenging things, which led to sort of some spiritual insight, a bit of an awakening, I suppose, and in a way that changed how I was perceiving the world, the setting, and the people around me. And I allowed that to be an opportunity to grow, to explore, to attempt to understand what I was getting into, feeling, and experiencing. So I started to read, started to get books, and start a collection. And I started to find ways I could try to get involved with a community-oriented function, to where I could connect with people who had similar interests or things that sort of made sense with what I was dealing with. And so I was hopeful that I'd be able to connect with other like-minded individuals who could allow me an opportunity to see what things are like from their point of view, and to continue to research, explore, and find all of the different things that I could in terms of spirituality, but not just that, really delving into the realm of metaphysics, the supernatural, paranormal, and things of that nature had always really been so captivating that I wanted to see how I could get involved, and so I started going looking to going to meetings and connecting with people, listening to lectures, and really just find ways to get involved. And so I'd say over the last 10 years, it's really been an interesting journey, an ongoing adventure, and I've just been enjoying every moment of it. And there's still so much I'd love to be able to do and look forward to doing, but it's just been a great time. And, of course, been able to go around the Lone Star State and beyond to meet great people such as yourself at these awesome events that we've been able to attend together. And it's just been a fascinating time, and it's been a really eye-opening experience. I've been able to, as you had mentioned earlier, just connect with people who have fascinating accounts and experiences that I feel that are really profound and offer a bit of insight into what we could be dealing with spiritually or in the realm of the paranormal, whether it has something to offer us scientifically, technologically, or just in society in general. I think that there's a lot we can learn from our experiences in these areas and what we can do to further our understanding. So it's been an ongoing journey. It's over the last decade of growth and to really see where things go. And of course, I don't think that journey really ever ends for any of us. But I'm honored to be able to connect with a lot of the people over the years and just be able to put together some interesting videos and productions based on those types of events and experiences. So I enjoy being able to share that with others to show that, yes, people do have these experiences, and it is okay to tell about them without feeling ridiculed or being called crazy. And of course, you get the idea, but it's just been a fascinating part in all of this.
What kind of books did you read when you were venturing into this new lifestyle?
Well, I really started to find what I guess you could say, dream interpretation really caught my interest a bit. So I kind of got into that, and that opened the door into a lot of things about the subconscious, Carl Jung, a lot of different archetypes, how things can be represented spiritually, metaphysically, and so I was fascinated by a lot of those types of ideas. But on the other end of it, I found equally as fascinating the idea that there are a lot of these different strange issues happening, whether it's people experiencing strange creatures, different paranormal instances or entities, things like that. I was fascinated by the idea that this is still a scientific mystery and that we can continue looking into these areas. So I picked up books that were focusing on the scientific point of view regarding issues such as UFOs and aliens, cryptozoology and Bigfoot, and then the paranormal ghosts and things. I think it's really interesting. I think over the years, while I do find those things interesting, I've gravitated more towards a lot of the more, I'd say, paranormal phenomenon in relation to how we can basically find scientific evidence to help corroborate these stories, and not just to debunk the things that aren't real, but really to just show that people experience these things. So some of the books I'd say are really fascinating out there deal with investigating UFOs. A lot of work from people like Jim Mars, who I eventually got to meet and work with, Nick Redfern. It's been a big inspiration of mine. People we were just talking about earlier, Ken Gerhard. Those are really big figures that I think really help to lay the foundational work for a lot of these types of phenomenon. And I found it interesting to get caught into, the renowned work of Zecharia Sitchin and his ancient astronaut theory, which I'll entertain a lot of different ideas. I might not necessarily completely buy into everything I read or hear or see, which I think is an important thing to do. But it's important to get an alternative viewpoint. So I was really fascinated into alternative history, understanding different ideas about what's going on, what's been happening in our world over the centuries and millennia, understanding things that have been happening behind the scenes, conspiratorial issues about different ruling figures, the elite, things like that. So I really try to cover a full spectrum, and I basically amassed a library of these types of books, and it's been really interesting to be able to look into some of the work that I was collecting and some of the authors that I was really interested in and inspired by, which I later ended up being able to meet and even work with on occasion. So it's been a great opportunity to find not just information through reading, but be able to go take a step further, connect with the people doing this work, and then get involved myself. So it really prompted me to really see how I can be proactive in this area, in this field, and hopefully contribute some good information by putting together video segments, publications, events, and bringing the community together.
Who would you point to as being one of the biggest influences in your life?
Well, there are so many different figures. I would say one of the main people that come to my off the top of my head would be Jim Marrs, simply because he was a very significant investigative journalist who covered issues which a lot of people dared not to even touch, because they'd say, well, you're just crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, things like that. But really, and after knowing Jim personally and working closely with him over the last few years, and of course, for those who aren't aware, unfortunately he passed away last August, and we had a memorial and such. But he was such a renowned figure in many different fields. Many people in the sort of, let's say, conspiratorial realm know him for his work regarding the JFK assassination, his UFO studies and research, and then following a trail of many political issues, touching upon the controlling and ruling elite. And I just bring these things up because these are probably the more well-known. But, of course, Jim was a Renaissance man of sorts. He did a lot of different things that, people that read his books might not be too familiar with, but he was really involved in his school reunions. He did reenactments. He was an artist, and he just was so well-rounded in a number of things, so vastly knowledgeable. He was just like an encyclopedia, and he was so very willing to entertain different possibilities, even though he might not really, believe or care to really know too much about it. He'd listen to what you had to say. He'd, have a line of people at any conference he'd go to that would want to tell him a story, and he wouldn't just brush them off. He'd take the time to sit down or be there with them and consciously absorb and take in what these people felt, strongly enough to be able to tell this person that they admired. And so Jim was a good friend of mine, and I'm honored to be able to have had that closeness to him. But he's definitely someone who comes to mind. And, of course, I think that people such as Jim and that connected with many different groups of people are, to me, probably the most inspiring, simply because when we reach out and find that a lot of this work is interconnected, it brings the community together. He was such an enlightening figure, and I really admire that. And he's someone who I can say has really been a big inspiration for the work I do, and it's just been a real blessing to have come across him and be able to do the work that we do together and help put on some events, and have helped him with some of the work he did. So, yeah, Jim Marrs is a big figure in my book, and of course there are many others as well, but he was a local here in Fort Worth, really, so that's why I think it stands out to me that someone like him can really, be accessible Whereas, let's say, if I really admired someone who lived far away, I might not have been able to have a closeness as such. And likewise, I'd mentioned earlier, Nick Redfern was someone who he's an author, of course, on a number of different subjects. And early on, when I was starting to really get into many of these different topics, he was someone who I read a lot about. I had several of his books, and it was just fascinating to see the wide variety of topics that he covered, and that inspired me. I thought, wow, I like the breadth of these fields and how there's no limitation to what we can really delve into, and so that inspired me to consider the full spectrum of what we're dealing with and to really go in and see what it has to offer. And just someone like Nick Redfern, who's written over 40 books now, is such an impressive feat that I look at that and I find that he's very admirable as well, and can only hope to look to be as interactive as he might, in some way. So these are people who I not only look up to, but who are here local, who I've been able to have the opportunity to work closely with and have a great time doing it. So these are great people as well. They're not just good researchers, but they're easygoing, they're friendly, but they'll tell you like it is. And if they don't think something is credible, or that they don't give it a lot of consideration for certain reasons, they'll be honest. And I think that that's a great trait. They're not really in it for the money per se, even though, of course, this field has a lot to offer. There are people who try to, exploit certain issues, but really I think when we're looking at it level-headed, it's okay to write books on these issues and to not just be seen as someone who's simply trying to make a buck off of it, but really trying to help inform the public, inform people that there's more to this world that meets the eye, and hopefully do some good to contribute what we have.
Jim Marrs was the go-to guy when it came to anything dealing with Aurora, Texas. Could you kind of tell us the history of that event?
Absolutely. So, of course, I found out about the incident in Aurora, Texas, through Jim and through others as well, but he was the primary source for myself. And so he wrote about it in his book, Alien Agenda, but before that even came out, he was involved on the, out in the field, on the ground in Aurora in the 70s, whenever this all came back into public awareness. But for those who aren't familiar, this is an interesting tale in Texas history, which is a bit of a mysterious one, but as it goes is that in 1897, on April the 17th, a metallic cigar-shaped cylindrical object came sputtering down from the south, heading north, and was in distress, came down hitting a windmill on a judge's land and exploding, basically leaving debris, metallic remains all over the place, destroying his flower garden, and leaving quite a mess. Of course, this was chronicled in the Dallas Morning News a few days later, which also tells about how the locals came by and found in the remains, in the debris, the remains of a body, which seemed to be something of a person, which, again, the newspaper says was not an inhabitant of this world. Now, this is an interesting story. I think that a lot of the tabloids at the time, a lot of the writings in the early newspapers and things were written to sell newspapers, and so a lot of times they could have been made up. And I don't discount the possibility that maybe this case in Aurora could have been made up. But I think there's a lot more information that we've seen come out over the years that Jim helped to contribute towards that shows that something did happen in Aurora, Texas in 1897. Whether it was alien or not, I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows, but I think that there's a lot of information that suggests that something happened, and maybe we'll find more out as the years go by, but it stands sort of as this legendary happening. And of course there's a historical marker in the cemetery where they took the remains of the body and buried it there, giving it a formal Christian burial. So all in all, you had this UFO crash and the recovery of a body. And this is very fascinating. This is what's something, Jim Marks called this the smoking gun of UFOs, simply because you have not just a sighting, but you have the object crashing, you have bits of the metal, which apparently there was a lot of metal, and then you have a body, which was buried. And so you have all of these different elements which add to a really incredible case. And over the years, a lot of different investigations have been underway to try to determine what exactly had happened, if it was an alien, or what we could be dealing with. And again, in the 70s, when Jim and other individuals were involved in MUFON and different organizations, they wanted to go to the cemetery and exhume the body to be able to see what we have, if it's an alien or what it could be. Of course, the Cemetery Association, along with the city, countered that notion and basically said, no, there's no way we can take that body out or whatever's there. We don't want to dig Grandma up, and we definitely don't want to bring back any diseases that led there, to there being a lot of those graves in that cemetery. Because around that time they had spotted fever, and it was not any good. It was nasty stuff. It was killing lots of people. So there are a lot of factors with that, and it's probably not a wise idea to just go shoveling out something that could potentially be, in a most literal sense, of extraterrestrial origin. And I say that simply because a lot of the other indications that we're getting about material, exotic materials or foreign materials, they have qualities about them that sometimes cause irradiation, so like radiation poisoning or things like that make people sick and maybe even die. So it might not be a good idea to try to dig this thing up, whatever is in there. But over the years, like I said, investigations have happened. Jim Mars was on a special on the UFO Hunters series from the History Channel. They came out and did a show on Aurora, basically to show that that something was going on. They did scanning and metal detecting, and they did ground-penetrating radar over the grave to show that there is a child-sized grave, and there could be something to it. The hard part about this case is finding the definitive hard evidence like the metal. Now, some metal has been sent in years back into different labs to see what it could be, finding traces of aluminum, zinc, and other mysterious metallic alloys and elements that were not being registered, so they could be unknown. And this could be one of the things that we see similar to the case of mystery metal in other UFO crashes like Roswell, which, interestingly enough, the metal and debris from Roswell, and maybe even allegedly some bodies, was taken over to Fort Worth, to Carswell. It makes me wonder if it was taken there because they had some previous experience with this type of thing 50 years back, which is another amazing note to think that not only was the Aurora UFO incident 50 years before the Roswell incident, but it's also a few years before the birth of modern aviation. The Wright brothers didn't even have their test flight until about 1903. So when we're dealing with an airship type situation, those really weren't very popular or even available or accessible until the 1900s. But there are, however, some interesting notions that elite groups like the Sonora Aero Club or NIMSA had some kind of involvement with constructing these aerial craft, these vehicles, whether they were advanced balloons, dirigibles, things like that, that were flying around, made by these scientists, these sort of cryptic groups. That could have been happening, and if one wants to look further, you can look into the work of Charles Delchaux and the blueprints that were put together to show some of these potential flying vehicles. And I think that's an interesting notion. It could imply that the Aurora vehicle that crashed, whatever it was, may have not been alien at all, but maybe some kind of alternative, non-conventional aircraft that was being debuted somewhere else. It's a possibility that we need to take into consideration, and it could mean that it might not be alien after all. But of course, after the years go by, in '97 they had their 100th year anniversary, and this is something that kind of allowed for a little bit of a resurgence of interest. And as the years go by, I was able to go to the city with Jim, and we just happened to show up after a city council meeting and propose to hold an event, a commemorative event to officially recognize the incident. And I got to meet Dr. Tony Wheeler, who's the city admin, and she was completely on board. And of course, later the next year in 2016, we held the first ever Aurora alien encounter, as you mentioned earlier, Chris. So it was a great turnout. We had a number of speakers, Jim Mars, of course, along with Nick Redfern, Tui Snyder, Noe Torres, who you mentioned, of course, good friend of ours, along with Stephen Androsco. And the keynote speaker we had was Travis Walton from the renowned story Fire in the Sky to give his account. And so we had a great turnout. It was a huge success, and so it showed that there are people interested in this phenomenon that are willing to come out to places and visit the crash site, visit the grave site on the tour, and it was a good time. And just here in the last week, I actually held another tour here, somewhat informally, but we had around 100 or more people show up, looking at the new city monument that's been erected, showing a windmill, a crashed spaceship, along with the alien and the new stylized city logo, and we went on down to the cemetery to check out the grave. And it's just a really interesting place. It's available for anyone to go check it out pretty much at any time. And, it was really an honor of Jim. I'm glad that we were able to do something like that. And as long as he had been working on that case, the city was just so opposed. And a lot of the people there, the population, really, for a long time, didn't want a whole lot to do with it. And, you have to understand that people move out to places out in the country because they might not really want to be bothered by a whole lot of city noise and folk. So you can see how people coming in and asking about the Aurora situation might be a bit of a nuisance. So even to this day, it's an interesting conundrum. But the city has taken upon the alien theme. They're going with it. They want to see this continue to help drive in a bit of tourism and see where it goes from there. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see what we can do. And, of course, all in honor of Jim's help and work to make Aurora probably more well-known than anyone else.
Do you also look into conspiracies? I know Jim, he had that thing about the JFK assassination. He wrote the book Crossfire that the movie JFK was based on. Have you looked into any of the conspiracies in and around your area?
Well, of course, when you mention JFK, that is a real big eye-opener, because that happened here in Dallas, not too far away from Fort Worth. And, of course, I wasn't around then, but, anyone can go now and look into it. It's just a challenging issue even now because from a modern perspective, we're supposed to be getting the JFK files released, and there's a lot of conflict with why they're still being withheld and whatnot. But from what I've looked into, and I've been fortunate to help Jim at a few of the JFK events that are held here in Dallas every year, which there are more than one, so it's been a ongoing thing for some time now, and they've been doing it for a number of years. It's a very very popular thing. A lot of people come out, and we'll have eyewitnesses. We'll have people coming and sharing testimony and the work that they do to help give and build a picture that there's more to what happened than what people realize. I've been fortunate enough here to meet a few of the people who were actually there that saw the event for themselves and had their own account of what had happened and how many gunmen there might have been, things of that nature. And so it's a really interesting opportunity for people to come and hear something that's not the conventional story. It's outside of what you'll hear probably on the news, and it's not a whole tinfoil hat type meeting, but really we're dealing with some very high caliber people, very professional, credible figures who come forward who have either been involved with the official side of things or have come forward, like I said, from eyewitness standpoints. And it really paints a picture that's different than the official story of Oswald, looking down from the depository and, firing a number of shots from a gun that, which Jim would say is, barely capable of making any accurate shots anyway. So I think that as he has inspired me to take into consideration something which I might not have really had much interest in, it just goes to show that there's more to something like the JFK assassination than just someone, shooting the president because of whatever personal vendetta, but that this person, Lee Harvey Oswald, had actually, been set up and framed, and then made a patsy, basically taking the fall. Jim was a huge advocate for the innocence of Oswald, and while a lot of people might think that sounds crazy, I would just say do your homework, do your research. A lot of people will just agree to something that they hear simply because they're being told that, and they don't look any further into it than maybe just what they're being told by the news, things like that. And while I've been fortunate enough to connect with those who are in that same party advocating the innocence of Oswald, it's just a very eye-opening experience to go through and see how these people share the information, which can be verified in a way that it is completely different than the official story. And it just goes to show how, unfortunately, how much the government has lied about so many things. And so we have to do what we can to really do our own research, make our own opinions and whatnot, but really not get too paranoid. No, not get too overwhelmed with the idea that this all can really make life feel like it's one big crazy conspiracy and all. I think when we look at it from a researcher standpoint, it's one thing. When you let it dominate your life overall, it can be kind of a bit troublesome. So you have to remember that you just have to take things one step at a time when you're doing this work, because there's so many things, and this is something Jim said, there's so many things you can know, but here's everything you need to know. And so he would lecture on the different aspects of the figures, the key suspects, who he would say LBJ, right off the bat, number one prime suspect in this whole thing, along with, you get in figures like, the mafia, and of course, it's just there are a number of things that you can know, but Jim advocated the innocence of Oswald and said, here are some things you need to know about this whole deal to really get a better picture. And so he showed how the information suggests that because of the things that someone like JFK was doing, helping to bring back the Treasury and get in the greenbacks, maybe even help with things like UFO disclosure and a number of other issues, there were people high up in government who didn't like this and wanted him to get out of there. Of course, he didn't want war either, so that's a number of issues just right there that you can see are troublesome. One thing he also mentioned, and this is a little bit graphic, but he would say, well, of course, there are two presidents who, have a few things in common. They both tried to, get money printed through the Treasury without going through the Federal Reserve. They were both trying to do things that were different, and they both got shot in the head in public. And unfortunately, that's Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. So Jim was someone who really wanted to expose a lot of the misinformation out there and really try to put together the best clear picture of what kind of information we have to show that these are different stories than what we're being told, and there's different information out there. Of course, there are all kinds of crazy conspiracies on a number of issues, aliens, the Illuminati, you name it. There's someone out there has conspired up an idea about, and, Jim said that he didn't really regard himself as much as a conspiracy theorist, theorist as he dealt with conspiracy fact. And that's a big difference. You know, when parties conspire, it doesn't mean that it's always sinister. It just means that it's being done through, you know, private means. And so a lot of times people have this connotation that it seems to be dealing with this crazy ideas and things. But really, I think that overall, you know, there is a lot going on behind the scenes that people don't know about, whether through defense secrecy or simple need-to-know basis. You know, there's a lot of information that most people will never have access to unless it is sometime revealed, declassified, or simply just outright blowing the whistle on. And I think that's been a big help. All three of those types of methods can really give us more information. So over the years, we're learning a lot about these types of things that we may never had before.
Tell us about your business, VORTEXAS. What is it, and how did you come up with it?
So I was getting involved with different meetings and things early on, like I said, when I was starting to read more, collect books, and try to figure out what I can do to participate in some of these events and things to, you know, meet some of these people I've been reading about and whatnot. I ended up getting involved with some groups, and I've always been interested in making videos and things. So I took a little bit of what I knew how to do in that realm, and I started to apply it in this other area of people coming and sharing about their work or their experiences and accounts. And so this turned into a production company of sorts, where I've made video productions, video segments, things like that, based upon, you know, a presentation, whether an author or lecturer would share about their work, or you have someone telling about an experience they had. I thought at first it was very worthwhile to go out and connect with these people who had something that they could share that people ought to hear about. And I thought, you know, it'd be interesting to provide it on a platform like YouTube for free, to where people can go listen to it, see what they think. They're not having to pay really anything, and then they can make up their own mind whether they believe it or not. And so I'll go and since I've started doing that, I really took it upon myself to rebrand and republish a lot of the work under a new name called VORTEXAS, which to me, you know, I'm a local Texan here, and so I thought, you know, I'll go along with the Texas theme, and, you know, I like the ideas of a vortex encompassing kind of this energetic pattern. And so while I don't just focus solely on things like aliens and UFOs, I actually look into a number of different areas of phenomenon, like cryptozoology, Bigfoot studies, ancient and sacred sites, spiritual traditions and practices, and philosophies, and of course holistic health and wellness. Really just a full spectrum of things I think is interesting to be able to provide and offer people. But similarly, not just to be able to offer them videos, but to host events and meetings and functions where people can come out and get involved in a way that, just like how I felt I need to be able to connect with a community of people who are oriented in this field. And so I try to do what I can to help provide that platform for people to come and be involved and have a sense of community. So it's really been a multi-pronged project for a number of years now that I'm really excited to see how it's grown, how it's come along, and all the information. And as you said, the hundreds of video segments that I've put together over the years that are mostly all on YouTube for free from several events, and people can just look at them at any time. They're all archived. They'll be there online forever, it seems. So you can always search something, and you know, while everything is still happening, I try to keep up with it the best I can, keeping up to date with new events. Anytime I can go out, do an investigation, do an interview, I'll put something together on it, and I'll share about it, upload a video, and just give people a resource to let them know about all this great stuff that's happening, not just here in the Lone Star State, but also all around the world. So I think it's important that we can provide this kind of content for people and make it accessible and not charge outrageous fees and come off as if we're just trying to exploit people or these areas, but rather provide them the platform to promote their work, to share about their stories, their interesting experiences, and also see what kind of connections can be made between this speculative phenomena.
Did you do some kind of training or some technical school somewhere to learn how to do all the things you do, or was it just something you were self-taught and you learned as you went?
Well, I did go to school, but I went to school for music, and so that was something that I was more interested at that time, really more than I was involved with any of this stuff. And while it still does play into what I do now, everything that I do as far as the production side of things, whether it's hosting events, publicly speaking, doing video production, I never really had any formal training or education on those things. But I think to tie back into what you had mentioned about, having any inspiring figures, I found that after the first few years of connecting with these meetings and doing videos of these different presentations, of course, for anyone that knows video production, video editing, when you're editing something, you usually have to watch it again and again and again and again to make sure it's all going smooth, it has what it needs, and then you can produce it. What I found through doing that was I would retain most all of the information. I'd say I have a pretty good memory, so I can remember things very well, but also I'd listen into how people would present things, how they'd speak, how they would use their tone of voice, how they would carry themselves, and I think it really gave me a really good impression of how to assimilate that. And so I basically utilized the influences that I had and turned it into something that I can really make into a practice for myself. So while I didn't have any formal training, I really took it upon myself to change my focus into allowing what I'm absorbing through all of this media that I'm doing, and turn it around into a practical format to where I can put together a seminar, put together a workshop, put together an event that features different speakers and functions like that. And so I found that my experience working with these people helped just continue to accumulate skills necessary to be able to function in this type of work. So it's really been a number of things, but I think my inspiration has come through, standing on the shoulders of the giants who have laid the foundation for this type of material, and listening to people giving speeches that I admire, and not necessarily trying to mimic them per se, but just learning what works well in a public setting and what can be appropriate and what might not work so well. And really just paying attention and just utilizing what my attention has gathered and then reiterating it depending on what I'm working with. So I think it's a number of things. But of course, as far as the technical aspect, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to offer help for a number of these events that have a lot of technical setup, whether it's the video, visual, and audio, the sound, the projectors, PA, the computers. I'd say I'm a pretty tech-savvy person, so when it comes to that stuff, I don't mind helping at all, and I've been fortunate enough to get my foot in the door with some really great people and events that have networked me into great situations where I'm very blessed to be able to work with. And so I've allowed it to sort of be a contracting thing of sorts to where I can make it also a profitable business if I really need to. But of course, I also have two other jobs that help to supplement all of my work so that I can travel, I can continue my videos and things of that nature.
About how many conferences do you attend in a year, guesstimate?
Oh wow. Well, I'd say, let's say, aside from frequent meetings, like monthly meetings, if we're talking big conferences that pull in, big numbers, hundreds more, and big speakers, I would say it's just to put it simply, every season I'm probably attending at least 1 to 2 big conferences, which are a lot of fun. I really recommend it. It doesn't always have to be about a strange subject. It can be something fun. You can go to a Comic-Con event and listen about, from your favorite shows or your actors that you like, and so that can be fun too. But I like to be able to, make my way around and bring my brother Matthew along, because I think it's a great way to be able to, connect with these great people, these great events, functions, and have him enjoy, just as much as I do. So we have a great time on these adventures, and the ones that I work at, I'd say, are just as enjoyable because I get that personal experience. It's a lot of fun. So probably about 1 to 2 each season a year.
Seeing your brother at the conferences, Matthew, does he enjoy them as much as you do, or is he more just along to be with you?
Well, I'd say that the scope of how much he is able to really take in is limited, of course. He's got Down syndrome. He's a little bit on the lower functioning side, but I wouldn't say he is disinterested in as much as he's just, able to enjoy, especially whenever anyone's giving like a PowerPoint or showing video clips, anything that's really captivating. He loves that stuff, and it's really fun for him to be able to connect and meet with a lot of these interesting people doing this work. Of course, I love it all as well, and I think him being able to come along with me has given him an opportunity to hear about things that he wouldn't otherwise hear about and learn about, see about all these different fun and interesting issues and mysteries in life that, if we didn't go to, maybe we wouldn't find much about at all. And so I think it's a great opportunity for him to connect with people, enjoy some interesting information, pictures and videos of strange stuff. And of course, he likes all the interesting creatures and things that we talk about, and the fun stuff as well. But he also comes to a lot of the holistic events, and he likes to interact with people there that do that have different practices and modalities that they share about. So it's something in a lot of the events we go to, a lot of people will recognize him, and it's a good way for him to be able to connect with friends and meet some new ones and just have a great time overall.
I saw him watching your setup there at Huntsville with all your computers and gadgets. Does he help out with any of the technical stuff, or is that just a little beyond him?
Well, it might be a little beyond him to actually manage using the equipment, but he's always helpful with if I need something, if he can get a cord, if he can hold some equipment, if he can bring it here, take it there. He's always eager. I think that's one of the fun things is, when we can work together, make it interactive. I think that's really where it counts. He might not be able to sit there and get on the computer and change the soundboard and change the audio levels or whatever we're needing to do. But he knows that things need to go a certain way, and he's just there to be helpful with whatever he can. And so I think whatever we can do to have him be a part in an appropriate way, I'm all for it. Now, if there's a bigger responsibility that requires a bit of intricate knowledge of the software and things, of course, that might be a little over his head. But as long as he can be present, I think that, to me, that's like I said, it's really where I find you get the greatest benefit, because as long as he can really just be present, be aware of what's happening, and have a good time, that's what I look for.
Say someone else were in a similar situation with a family member, what would you pass on to them to help ease the day-to-day issues?
Well, I think it's important to just give them the best life that they can have, and whether you're able to bring them with you on a trip or to work or wherever it is, if you can have them interactive, if you can have them involved with something that you can do with them and help show that they're, whatever they're interested in, you help to utilize what they like to do and bring it into a setting that connects with what you're doing and with what they're doing, and just have a good time overall. I think that's what counts, is providing the environment for stability, for recreation, and just for overall development and growth. I think if you have the right formula for all of those things, you can't go wrong. I think it's important to allow for people of special needs an opportunity to participate in whatever's happening, in a way that can accommodate. So I think as long as we accommodate for everyone with an equal opportunity, whether they have Down syndrome, whether they're just physically handicapped, or whatever it might be, we need to be more open in allowing for everyone an opportunity to participate, whether, we're having an event or a function like that, or it's just going to work or whatever it is, and just show compassion. Be compassionate for each other. I think that's the greatest thing we can do for all of our brothers and sisters all over the world, of course. But when it comes to having someone with special needs, that's really dependent upon someone else to help provide and make sure that things, are going the way they need to be. Just keep in mind that you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself, and that all things are set in place for you to be able to provide for that person, and that, do what you can to help for someone else, because I think it's one of the most selfless things you can do, is help to ensure that they are taken care of, and that they're accounted for, that they're a part of what's happening, and to not exclude them, to not talk past them as if they're not really present or there or that they matter, but to include them in a way that makes them feel good, and to really point out the things that they are really great at, and to help, just encourage them the best you can. Just anytime you see someone, and while I'm not trying to really discriminate here, but anytime you see someone in the street, at the store, whatever, if they have special needs or whatever it is, just say something nice, give them a compliment. Say, hey, great shirt, or, you got a great haircut, I like it, or great glasses, or whatever you want to say. It's just something that helps to encourage, make them feel better, make them feel included, and not make them, stand out, but just because a lot of people are very timid about, how to approach, and I get that a lot, how do I approach Matthew? Should I try to, say hi or shake his hand? And of course, he might be a little shy, but, don't treat him any differently than you would me. It's just, you want to be able to interact with them just like they're people, just like, you and I, Chris. So it's something I think is an important part of making them feel included. Just, honor that and be compassionate for them.
Hmm. Do you do active sighting investigations or mostly just historical work? Well, if I can, really I try to do both as much as I can. I think the historical ones are a lot of fun. Historical and active can be also an interesting combination. And also it allows me an opportunity to go get out in the field, if there's something actively happening, if there's a report or there's something that's just breaking news or just someone has had a sighting. As much as I can, I like to get, my feet on the ground, go out there, see what's going on myself. To me, I think a lot of it really comes from my curiosity, just really having a sense of, looking to find more about what we're dealing with. And so if anything active comes up, whether if someone sees something in the sky, they see a strange creature, I'd love an opportunity to get out there in the field. Anything that, takes me out there and that I can get immersed in, I look forward to it. But also, like something that could be historical but also active is fun as well. A good example would be out in Marfa. You've got the Marfa Lights. And, of course, that's a historical case. It's been going on for a long time. But you can still go out there and see them any time almost. So that's the kind of fun combination where, you can study and examine, research the historical side, and then again you can go out there and see the active
current phenomenon. And so, anything that's going on currently, that's always a really interesting issue. It can be hard to find, a lot of cases unless they're directly reported. But I think if we just leave open the, if we have a way that people can share that information openly and not be ridiculed, and follow up in a way that we can do, launch an investigation, do an interview, something like that, I think it's important to really make an effort, if anything. And another example would be, recently we had this big outpour in the media about a project called ATIP, which you may remember back from Edinburgh. We had a lot of talk about that at the UFO conference down there. ATIP is, of course, the Pentagon's program to study UFOs and things like that. And so, while this is breaking news to some people, a lot of people would say, well, we've known about that for a long time. But what it gives an opportunity for us to do, the researchers, the journalists, the ones producing material for us to have as a resource, we can follow up with the figures sharing about the information, the sources, and the ones involved, and we can hopefully share their perspective on it for others to be able to glean some insight into. And so, as an example, I was able to do some interviews at that conference with Nick Pope, John Greenwald, Travis Walton, and Stephen Bassett. And so, I'm very fortunate to be able to, connect not too long after something like a major UFO disclosure announcement has sort of been made, even if it was somewhat subtle, and then follow up by talking with people like the Ministry of Defense's Nick Pope, who worked on their UFO program for a number of years. And this is a great way for people to see, okay, the government actually does have an involvement. It's not all just, Hollywood hoaxes and stuff like that, but there is a real phenomenon. The government really does have an involvement, and what can we do? What tangibly can we do about it? Well, what I like to try to do is talk to the people involved to the closest degree, and maybe do an interview and produce it for people to hear about, provide that as a resource for information.
Have there been a lot of sightings in and around the DFW in the last few months?
Well, what's interesting, here in DFW we have like the second largest, one of the largest airports in the world, and so there's a lot of lights, a lot of stuff flying around, and so there are some UFO sightings very frequently. A lot of those might be able to be dismissed as, oh, well, that's this or that's that, but there are some genuine mysteries when it comes to things around the area. We do get some reports in the local MUFON group every now and then. We just try to utilize the field investigators' work to go out and figure out what's going on. We actually were coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the Stephenville UFO incident, which that's not too far away. And that was a huge deal. That was what people would call a UFO flap, where you have a really large and huge rash of sightings, but a large object, apparently, which seemed to be either accompanied or pursued by some F-16s, which originally was denied having happened, but then later they came out saying, yeah, we had about 10 of them out there. So that's kind of an interesting case that we're looking back that seems to still be ongoing. Some people say that there's still stuff happening out there, that they still see things, sometimes maybe triangular-shaped objects. And, of course, people around the area say they see different lights in the sky. And a lot of that can be very ambiguous and hard to follow up on, especially if you see something one time and that's it. It's hard to go back out and attempt to try to see it again because there's no guarantee that it will be there. Unless you're in Marfa, then you can go and keep seeing it. But it seems like some of the UFO sightings are hard to follow up just because unless you can really get some good, credible information out of the witness, and if they're even willing to come forward, or if they're even familiar with how to report something, it can be any number of things that's up in the air. And you just have to be considerate that how many people that see something strange even report it. Probably not too many. And if they do, you know, you can only hope that it's actually a genuine and decent sighting that, you know, can help us figure some things out. But of course, you know, the other interesting aspect is it's not just UFOs. We've got a lot of other interesting areas as well up here in the DFW area. While the state of Texas may not be known to have a lot of Bigfoot sightings, we actually do. As we were just at the first annual Southeast Texas Bigfoot Conference, anyone who was in attendance would easily, you know, soon find out that Texas actually has a lot of sightings of Bigfoot activity, mostly in the East Texas area, in the forest areas over there, and so it's something that, you know, is not really too prominent in the city, but an interesting tale we have over here in a place called Lake Worth, pretty much in Fort Worth, is of the Lake Worth monster. You've probably heard about this one, and a number of people have as well, also referred to as Texas Goat Man. This is a fun tale that people, you know, have gone on about since the late 60s, and I like to think of it as the sort of Bigfoot of Fort Worth. And while I don't think that there's really any possibility that it's still there now, it's just fun to think and to go to the Fort Worth Nature Center and to look at the area that supposedly something like this Goat Man or Lake Worth monster, which seems to be kind of like a Bigfoot creature, could have been seen in. And of course, there's the talk of how it was up on a ridge and threw a tire down at 40 people, party goers, you know. And so while a lot of people come out and said, oh, that was just a hoax, that was some kid in a costume, maybe so, you know, and I don't discount that. But if you even say that there's a 1% possibility that it was real, you have to just stop and think, wow, that's 40 people at one time, 30 to 40 people, who saw a strange creature, maybe like a Bigfoot-type creature, throw a tire at them from, you know, pretty high up. And so you have to kind of correlate that with other cryptid sightings, which is what you call a strange creature in the field of cryptozoology. How many other sightings of strange creatures have not just 5 people, not just 10 people, but maybe 30 to 40 people? And it really makes you wonder, you know, was there something to it? Could all those people just have made that up or seen something that was a hoax, or were they all just really drunk? We don't really know, but I think that there could be something to it. Of course, now there's not really a whole lot of activity, but it's a fun place to go check out. And we're going to actually be holding a tour in July to kind of commemorate the incident, and that's going to be at the Fort Worth Nature Center in Lake Worth. And so we like to be able to bring people out to talk about these things actively and openly, to share about the information, see what they think, and you know, not to try to convince anyone, make them believe something, but rather just share about the information, the resources, allow for them to make up their own mind, but also give them the possibility to come check it out themselves.
If somebody were interested in the event, the Lake Worth Monster, how would they get a hold of you, or do they simply show up at the event at the time?
Sure, both of those things would work, really. If you were really looking to get a hold of me, you can always go to the VORTEXAS page and contact any of those. You can email me, DanielAllenJones@hotmail.com. We also have an event page for the tour on Facebook, and it will soon be on Eventbrite. It's a free event other than paying the admission into the Fort Worth Nature Center, which is only $5. So it's an opportunity for people to come, check out the place, and, you know, have a good little hike around. So if you were interested in going to the tour we're going to put together, you can contact me on Facebook, my email. You can see the events. You can type in the Lake Worth Monster Meetup on Facebook, and that's going to be on there. And I should have that on Eventbrite here soon. And again, it's going to be in July on Saturday the 14th. And so that's still a bit of a ways off. We're hoping that we'll have good weather so it's not too scorching hot, but there are some covered areas, so it's not going to be too bad. And you can go out to Greer Island as well, kind of a neat place. And so, yeah, I mean, we like to encourage the participation of people coming to these types of events just so they can be more interactive and involved in the communities, and the city can see that there is interest. And, of course, I help to share about a number of other events around the area. Again, whether it's UFOs and aliens, Bigfoot, strange creatures, cryptozoology, whether it's holistic medicine, health, alternative medicine, wellness-oriented functions, we share about that, spiritual events, and all kinds of other things. We like to be able to share about that information. You can check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/VORTEXAS. And we have a number of groups on there. You can get involved and share about if you have events you want, share, you can do that too. Be glad to connect with you. And it's something that we like to be able to offer as a way, as a resource and way people can find out about things happening in their area.
I saw on your Facebook page, or correction, it was the YouTube page, the group Satori. Were they shutting down, or were they just simply moving from that one building?
So Satori is a group here in the DFW area that meets every month. We have a monthly meeting on different topics, different speakers every month, and so it's a lot of fun. We're originally situated at a location in the Richland Hills area that is no longer available, and so we've since been at a new location for about a little over a year now, and we had been at the other location for about almost 10 years, so we just wanted to kind of honor the space that we shared there, do a final kind of clearing, and then we are at this new place, and we have a monthly meeting every second Friday of the month where we have different speakers come out on different topics. I'm actually going to be this month's speaker, and we like to also provide a live stream, if at all possible, for people that aren't physically in attendance. They can tune in as well. And, of course, I do a video production of all the Satori meetings and presentations to be able to offer on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/VORTEXAS Network. So this 11th, on May the 11th, Friday, May the 11th, I'm going to be speaking on Texas UFO mysteries, aliens, crashes, and disclosure. And I'll cover a number of different sites around the area that are prominent in Texas UFO lore, such as Aurora, Edinburgh, Marfa, Del Rio, and a number of others that I know that you've also been to and been familiar with, Chris. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'd like to be able to share about those things. And Satori is something we offer, again, every month, different topics. And you can go on to the YouTube channel and see some of the past presentations we've held.
Where will the next meeting be held at?
We held all the Satori meetings at a place called Harmony Fellowship. They offer us a space to be able to hold the Satori meetings, and we're very grateful for that. It's in Fort Worth on Pennsylvania Avenue, and there's an event page on Facebook for that as well. If you're interested, you can just go to Facebook and just type in on the search Satori, Satori DFW, and you'll find our page. On that page, you'll find the events we have coming up, and be glad to connect. And if you're having a hard time with that, you can just search me either on Google or Facebook, or my email, Daniel Allen Jones, and I'd be glad to connect with anyone who's interested in trying to attend in person or through the live feed.
Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience before I let you get back to your life?
Well, today is May the 4th, so I'd just like to say May the 4th be with you to everyone out there listening. Just on another special note, I actually, one of my other jobs I work at is over here at a place called Holocron in Fort Worth. This is Fort Worth first ever vintage toy store. It's an all Star Wars store, and we're having our Star Wars Day out here for May the 4th. And it's just a really cool place for anyone that wants to go back and stroll down memory lane, see some of those really cool Star Wars collectibles and memorabilia. Fun place. Definitely recommend checking it out. It's called Holocron. And for anyone interested in any of the other work that I do or events coming up, I highly recommend checking out the VORTEXAS network. You can check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/VORTEXAS network, facebook.com/VORTEXAS, or you can find me on there on Facebook, Daniel Allen Jones, and I'd be glad to connect with anyone interested in learning more about these events, or if you have something, an experience or something you'd like to share. We've got, of course, our DFW MUFON meetings coming up as well. We like to be able to offer a little bit of something for everybody, whether it's you're local or you want to tune in live. We'd be glad to accommodate. So for anyone with questions, feel free to email me, DanielAllenJones@hotmail.com, and I'd be glad to get back with you.
Well, thanks for being on Strange Things with us tonight. Now, this has been Daniel Allen Jones on Strange Things. Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Truck. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?